As midnight approached on Saturday, June 17, 2023, 39-year-old Amber Spradlin was completing her shift at the Brick House restaurant in Prestonsburg, Kentucky, where she was a hostess. Normally, she didn't go out drinking after work. But a man by the name of Roy Kidd was planning to drink and party that night. He told Amber he was heading out to the Seasons Inn, which was a motel that had a bar attached to it. Seasons Inn was owned by Chris McKinney, who is the brother of Dr. Michael McKinney, a local dentist who was also Amber's boss, because, in addition to his dental practice, he was the owner of the Brick House restaurant. Amber's cousin, Dr. Debbie Hall, told Twisted Crimes in an exclusive interview that Amber may have had a little crush on Roy, and crushes can make people do things they would not normally do. So when Amber left the Brick House that night, she drove over to Seasons Inn to meet Roy. They hung out here drinking and having fun until last call at 2 a.m. By that point, Dr. McKinney had arrived along with his son, also named Michael McKinney, but people call him MK. According to Debbie, Josh Mullins, who apparently likes to be called Square, and his girlfriend, who has not been named, were also here. At closing time, all 6 of them ended up in Dr. McKinney's car and made the short 3-minute drive down the road to his house. Amber left her car at Seasons Inn.
They partied all through the night. Then by the time 5:30 in the morning rolled around, things had gotten out of control.
A call was placed to 911. Someone was bleeding profusely from the head and drunk. But Dr. McKinney got on the phone. He assured the 911 operator everything was fine. No police officer was sent to the house at that time. Then several hours later, another 911 call was placed. This time when police arrived, they found the body of Amber Spradlin. This is Twisted Crimes.
On October 7, 1984, John and Sharon Spradlin welcomed a beautiful baby girl into the world, and they named her Amber. Sadly, tragedy struck early, and it struck often in Amber's life. On Wednesday, December 14, 1988, when Amber was just 4 years old, her mom Sharon took a break from her parenting duties for a night and headed out to a local bar called the Wildcat Lounge. The Courier-Journal reported at the time that a bartender would later say Sharon had been served 2 beers while she was there. Around midnight, the bar shut down for the night. All of the customers were sent home. The owners, James and Ellen Sellards, would later say they checked the entire bar, including the bathrooms, to make sure no one was there. The workers cleaned things up, turned off the lights, and everyone left. Or at least, James and Ellen thought everyone had left, but actually Sharon was still there. She had somehow gotten locked inside the bar. Police said she started to panic, grabbed a chair, put it under a window, broke the window, and tried to climb out.
Amber's mother was a larger woman, and they found her a window about that big. She was more stuffed out of it, and she had been locked up in the bar, and the story was that she was locked up in the bar and panicked and tried to get out, which made no sense to any of us with a telephone inside the bar.
Lots of unanswered questions when it comes to the death of Sharon. James and Ellen checked the entire bar, including the bathrooms, and they did not see Sharon anywhere. So where was she? Then she panics when she realizes she's locked inside the bar. So she attempts to climb through this tiny little window. It seems the only way she could have managed to get locked inside the bar in the first place would have been if she would have done so on purpose. But if she did so on purpose, why did she panic? And what would have been her reason for doing so on purpose? Then, as Debbie pointed out, there was a phone inside the bar, but instead of using it, she attempted to climb through the window. Also, if she wanted to climb out a window, why would she pick the second row of windows instead of attempting to climb out from the lowest point? It seems police quickly came up with an easy explanation for a very strange death and closed the case. Her death investigation should be reopened and looked into again. Sharon was only 33 years old when she died. After her mom's death, Amber continued to live with her dad for about a year.
Her father took care of her for a while, but it wasn't an ideal situation, and so her grandparents adopted her. They took custody of her, and then it was years later that they adopted her.
On the evening of September 26, 1996, when Amber was just 11 years old, her sister Angela was in a terrible car accident.
It was a really foggy night, and there was a rock fall and a huge boulder in the road. It was about the size of a vehicle, and it was so foggy no one could see, and it was on a 4-lane, so they came through there at a pretty good pace and hit right into the big boulder in the road. And Angela was in the back seat, and it immediately just threw her to the roof of the car, and it broke her neck. She died immediately.
About a decade later, Amber's father died at the age of 52. Amber lived in this house most of her life. This was her grandparents, Margie and James, who liked to be called Merle, Osborne's house. She moved in with them when she was around 4 years old and didn't move out until she was 37. As a child, her grandparents raised her and took care of her. When they all got older, Amber started taking care of them.
Amber just stepped in, and I guess the gradual thing, she started doing the grocery shopping and then helping get them to doctor's appointments and cooking the meals and then paying the bills for them and making sure that they were fed.
Margie passed away on Christmas Eve of 2019 at the age of 84. Amber continued to take care of Merle until he passed away at the age of 81 in 2022. Suddenly, for the first time in her life, at 37 years old, Amber was all alone.
I was really concerned about her, but she actually met a guy, and that was like her actual first real adult relationship that she had had. So that kept her occupied a lot and kept her from being really lonesome. That went pretty smoothly for about 6 months, and then it didn't.
Her grandparents left Amber some money when they died, so she decided to use that money to buy a house of her own.
She bought my mom and dad's home, so she bought my childhood home to move into. And I was so psyched because I thought, I get to keep spending Thanksgivings and Christmases in my home where I've lived and had them all my life. So we got to have one Thanksgiving there, but
Amber had spent her entire adult life taking care of people, and shortly after she got her own place, her kindness and generosity was on full display again when a friend needed some help.
Just as soon as the relationship ended, she had a good friend of hers who had 3 children that needed a place to stay for a few weeks or a month or something. It's just in transition, so she allowed them, and she enjoyed that, entertaining them.
Debbie and Amber were extremely close throughout Amber's life. They traveled all over the world together.
She and I together, we went to the Bahamas, we went to London and Paris, and then we did some little shorter trips around here, just like to Abingdon, Virginia, or Nashville, Tennessee. Anytime I had to go out of town for a conference, she was always ready to go with me.
We asked Debbie to share with us her favorite Amber story.
She and I went to Paris, France together, and she had a bad knee, and she was having trouble getting around, so I had to put her in a wheelchair, and I had to push her all around the Louvre Museum, and we get up to the Mona Lisa, and, it's just packed around there. And she's looking at me. She's sitting in the wheelchair looking at me. I said, you're going to have to get up and walk over to there to look at that. There's no way I can get you any closer.
When Amber wasn't traveling around the world with Debbie or taking care of her grandparents, she was out enjoying live music or watching wrestling.
She loved to go to concerts, and she took a lot of her cousins or younger cousins to concerts. She loved wrestling too, so she would take them to wrestling. She liked doing things with her younger cousins and showing them a good time. We always just loved cooking, and family always got together. Every Sunday we would get together for dinner, the whole family would. There was about a dozen of us, and she would always help us cook and plan. And she just enjoyed getting together. I mean, she was a real foodie. She liked to cook, and she liked to go out and eat, and she was a food critic. So that was probably, actually, I tried to encourage her to try to go to culinary schools.
In addition to cooking, she also enjoyed going out to eat. She and Debbie especially enjoyed the Brick House restaurant.
She and I actually used to go there a lot and eat dinner together.
So, when it came time to find a job, Amber headed to the Brick House and applied. She was hired as a hostess and started working here on May 18th, 2023.
It was a part-time position. She would work 4 hours at a time, 2 or 3 days a week was all. Sometimes I'd ask her to stay longer, and she'd call Missy and say, I need to work a double tonight. So, yeah. Missy said, Amber, 8 hours of a regular shift, 16 would be a double. She was the hostess, so she would seat people and Just,
Okay.
how are you? She was meant for that position.
Saturday, June 17th, 2023, was a normal night at work for Amber. She was grabbing menus, smiling at guests when they walked in the door, asking how many were in their party, and taking them to their seats. She had been talking to Roy Kidd throughout the week, and the two of them had decided to meet up at the bar at Seasons Inn once her shift ended. So, around midnight, she drove to Seasons Inn to meet with Roy. Chris McKinney has since sold the business, and it appears to be shut down at this time. Shortly after she arrived, Dr. McKinney showed up with his son and two other people.
And those people are not named still.
Well, Josh Mullins, I think that's common. And then his girlfriend, I'm not certain of her name.
At some point, Amber and Roy started hanging out with Dr. McKinney and his group, and when the bar closed down at 2 a.m., the six of them all left together in Dr. McKinney's car. She was probably excited to go to her boss's house.
And I think, too, she may have, this is my boss. This is my chance to get to go to my boss's house. And this is my chance to make a good impression on my boss. I just assume she probably thought that, too.
Debbie said she doesn't think Amber had ever hung out with Dr. McKinney, MK, Josh Mullins, or his girlfriend before that night. When the group got to Dr. McKinney's house, the drinking continued. Debbie said at least one person in the group drank so much that he blacked out. At around 5:30 a.m., a call was placed to 911.
The phone call was not about Amber, and it was not placed by Amber, and it was about someone that was messed up, drunk, and falling and bleeding profusely. And in the same phone call, Dr. McKinney gets on the line and says, there's nothing life-threatening. I don't need any assistance right now. I'll call you back if I do.
Workers at the call center, for some reason unknown, decided Dr. McKinney had the situation under control, so there was no need to contact local police to send an officer to check on things.
The county gave the contract to 911 call center to the Prestonsburg City instead of the state police, and at that point the state police pulled some troopers from our county, and I wasn't aware of this until I went to the physical court meeting following Amber's death, and I asked, why no one answered the phone call. And Judge Williams said that they had no coverage out in the county from midnight to 6 a.m.
So no matter what happened, nobody was coming.
If they said if somebody was available, they would try to send them. And they had the option of either passing the call on off to the Kentucky State Police or passing it on off to the sheriff's office, but instead they did nothing. So the city police could have responded, or they could have passed it to the sheriff's office, who might or might not have responded, or they could have passed it to the Kentucky State Police, who might or might not have responded. But instead, they did nothing.
We don't know if Amber was still alive when that 911 call was placed. Police have not released her time of death. We don't know much about what happened during the next 4.5 hours. One thing we do know is that Dr. McKinney made at least 3 phone calls during that time period. One of those calls was to Randy Woods, who was the chief of police for the city of Prestonsburg at the time. We're not sure who the second call was made to. Then, around 10 a.m., Dr. McKinney made a call to 911, telling them there was a dead woman in his house. This time, dispatchers were able to round up some officers to send them over to the house.
City police was the first on the scene. And it's my understanding it was Randy Woods and Jonathan Pack. And I'm not sure exactly who was first or who arrived together or the timeline of that.
Yes, the same Chief Randy Woods, who Dr. McKinney called before calling 911, may have been the first person to arrive at the house. Chief Woods was not only a good friend of Dr. McKinney, he was also a relative of some of the people who were in the house that morning.
First cousins with Roy Kidd, second cousins with M.K. McKinney, the son, and friends with Dr. McKinney.
Why did Dr. McKinney call Chief Woods before calling 911? And what did the two discuss on that phone call? We reached out to Randy Woods and Dr. McKinney and asked them, but neither one of them has responded to us. When police did finally arrive, almost 5 hours after the first 911 call, they saw a horrific sight.
Our attorney, who had gone and seen crime scene photos, said there was blood everywhere.
Police didn't notify Amber's family about the murder right away, but as the day went on, her family started to feel something was wrong.
Brandon and I were in Huntington, West Virginia, which is about an hour and a half from here, playing golf, and Missy called me and she said, have you heard from Amber? I said, she always calls me at 9:30 every morning, and she didn't call me this morning, and I can't get a hold of her. She's not answering. I said, well, no, I talked to her at 11:30 last night. She was fine. And I said, let me see what we can find out. And Brandon's brother's a Kentucky State policeman, so we called him, and within 10 minutes he called us right back, and he said, Amber's been murdered. And I was just in shock. I mean, I don't know, my initial, I was like, well, no, there's no way, that's crazy. We just gotta go home and see what's wrong with her and get her fixed, and she'll be fine. It was just such denial. But we just, as soon as we heard that, we threw everything in the car, and we made it here in about 45 minutes.
When the family got the details of what happened to Amber during the early morning hours of June 18th, they were in shock again. During a late June press conference, Debbie said, she was stabbed, not once, not twice, not 3 times, but at least 11 times in her head, her neck, and her throat. These monsters slit her throat all the way around. They took a knife and stabbed her right in front of her throat, all the way through to her spine. They stabbed her underneath her cheekbone, all the way up behind her eyeball. They stabbed her in the side of the head and broke the knife tip off in her head. I can't imagine what she was going through. It is horrible. According to reporting by Jeff Vanderbeck with the Floyd County Chronicle, on the day of Amber's murder, Dr. McKinney also called the county attorney for Floyd County, who is a man by the name of Keith Bartley. Keith's office is right next door to Dr. McKinney's dental office. They even share a signpost together. Jeff wrote in his story published on August 9th that he called Keith to ask him about that phone call. He wrote, quote, I asked the nature of that call from Dr. McKinney to Keith Bartley, and he said that McKinney asked him for advice on hiring a lawyer, to which Bartley gave him advice to hire a lawyer. Bartley told me that the lawyer was McKinney's college buddy, but I'm being told that's not the case, and that the lawyer is Bartley's college buddy. End quote. Now, why is the county attorney advising a citizen of his county to hire a lawyer after a body was found inside his home? Probably because they're buddies, and he's looking out for his buddy. If this was any other normal citizen of the county who was not rich and powerful, do you think that person would have gotten the same advice from Keith, or any advice at all, in the same situation? Dr. McKinney did apparently quickly hire an attorney who must have advised him to not talk. Debbie said Dr. McKinney and MK have not spoken to the police at all as part of this investigation. She said there was a warrant issued for their DNA, so they did end up having to provide that.
I've known Roy Kidd for about 30 years, and he did get permission from his attorney a couple of days after the murder, and he contacted me. He called me and told me that he couldn't discuss aspects of the case with me, but that he was very sorry and that he did not hurt Amber, and that he was going to cooperate fully with the investigation.
Now, Roy Kidd, as well as the Josh Mullins and his girlfriend, all of them have talked to police. Is that correct?
As far as I know, I think some have cooperated a little more fully than others have.
Out of that 3?
Yes.
Then you got McKinney and his son, and they haven't talked at all?
Have not at all.
5 days after Amber's murder, Chief Randy Woods became former Chief Randy Woods when he resigned as Chief of Police for Prestonsburg. Prestonsburg Mayor Les Stapleton told 13 News it was a personal matter and would not go into any other details as to why Randy resigned. Randy sent a statement to WYMT News which said in part, "This decision did not come lightly and has weighed heavily on me and my family since the horrific events of June 30th, 2022. And after much consideration and prayer, I made the decision to move on and into the next chapter." The horrific events of June 30th, 2022 he is referring to is that 3 officers and a K-9 were killed in the line of duty that day. The statement does not mention Amber Spradlin at all, and the timing is very strange. being just 5 days after her murder, but almost a year after the horrific events of June 30th, 2022. Just my opinion here, but it seems more likely Randy resigned because of something to do with Amber's murder, and that the events of June 30th, 2022 had little, or perhaps nothing at all, to do with it. We also asked former Chief Woods about this, but he did not respond. The Kentucky State Patrol is handling the investigation, and investigators aren't saying much. They are having to go through lots of evidence, and despite the fact they have a 1.5-year backlog, Debbie told us Amber's case has been moved to the front of the line. Debbie said she doesn't think this case involves drugs, Amber's toxicology report was negative for drugs, and she does not think Amber saw something she was not supposed to see.
I think that the person who did this is a sociopath. And I think that this has been behavior that started years and years ago and has escalated. And that's going to be so hard for people to understand. But I think that's what it is. The guy's a sociopath. He just wanted to kill somebody.
When you say behavior started, that could be animals or something, violence like that?
Yes, that's what I'm thinking. And that's some of the rumors that I have heard. I have no direct knowledge of this myself, but I've heard a lot of rumors regarding torturing and mutilating animals.
From what Debbie has told us, Amber was an amazing person who spent almost all of her life taking care of others. She never would have hurt anyone. She loved her family and her friends. She must have felt safe that night as she hung out with Roy, someone her family had known for decades, along with her boss, his son, and the other couple. Did she ever feel any danger in those early morning hours? Did this coward brutally attack her while she was passed out asleep somewhere? After hanging out with Amber that night, why did one of these people decide she was someone they must kill? Why did they decide to stab her so many times, so hard that it broke the knife tip off in her head? Where did all this rage come from? After all, if it was anyone in the group besides Roy who killed Amber, then that person barely even knew her, may have only met her for the first time that night. Yet the person killed her in a fit of rage that would be considered overkill, which normally indicates a crime of passion. After that knife broke, as the person stood there looking at Amber's body, after she had taken her last breath and she was no longer moving, what thoughts were running through this person's mind? Was the person excited? Proud? Did the person feel any shame or sorrow? What about the other people in the house? What did they see or hear? Whoever did this is walking among the people of Kentucky every single day, continuing to live their life as if nothing happened. If this person is not arrested soon, at what point will that rage build up again? When will they kill again? Who will they kill next? We asked Debbie if she is scared for her own life. After all, she has been the main spokesperson for the family, and a violent murderer is still on the loose in the town she lives in.
I've gotten a whole lot of support, which really helps a lot. And the majority of it, the majority of people want to see justice. I'm not afraid, but I realize that I'm putting myself out there. But if people aren't willing to stand up for what's right, then people can just keep on doing this and getting by with it. So, at some point, people got to start standing up. And I loved Amber, and I could not live with myself if I didn't do everything I possibly could to see that the person answers for this.
Instead of trying to help police solve this crime, Dr. McKinney and MK have gone silent. Why? Aren't they worried about the community they live in? Fearful for their own safety? Or are they covering something up? Dr. McKinney makes his money off the good folks of Prestonsburg, Kentucky. but he won't help police get a murderer off the streets? A dedicated employee of the Brick House restaurant was brutally murdered. But there's not a single post we could find about Amber Spradlin on the Brick House Facebook page. Why? We've heard the Brick House has great food. We will not be finding out for ourselves. And maybe you should think twice about eating here as well. Dr. McKinney might be a great dentist, but there are others you can support for now, at least until this case is solved.
We've now reached the portion of the video where we're going to share our own thoughts and opinions on this case, starting with Heather.
This case kind of reminds me of the Murdaugh case. There's a lot of people that have power here and a lot of money that seem to be trying to protect their name and also the name of the community and what goes on. Another thing is that really sticks out, and it's really, really frustrating to us, is that the 911 call was not handled properly at all, and it makes no sense.
That has got to be infuriating for the family of Amber Spradlin, the fact that this 911 call was not responded to around 5:30 in the morning, multiple hours before the next call was made where they found Amber's body. And no one showed up for that first call.
And who knows? Maybe if someone did show up, it could have been prevented, or possibly she would have been taken to the hospital and, been able to live.
That's right. She may not have died. This whole case, none of this may have happened if that 911 call would have been responded to properly. We don't know what was going on in the house now, but we'll never know because they needed to show up and figure out what was going on. Roy Kidd apparently had busted his head open. He's bleeding profusely, according to what Debbie Hall told us. And Dr. McKinney gets on the phone and says, don't come. And they say, oh, what? We're not going to go out there. McKinney must be having a lot of fun up there at his house. We're just going to leave him alone. He says, it's all good. It's all good. You don't listen to the homeowner who might be a guilty party in the situation and not send the police out there. It's outrageous.
And that's another thing that I feel that, you know what? That all goes down. Wouldn't that be really suspicious in your mind to think, okay, you have someone to call about an incident. The homeowner gets on the phone and says, hey, everything's okay. To me, I would be like, whoa, I would take a step back and think we got to get authorities over there quick because this does not seem right at all. It doesn't sit right, doesn't feel right.
Just seems like they're real big on saving money around here, and it's a lot more important to save lives. Now, if you were in that house, or if you know something, if you've heard something, you got to get in touch with the police here. We're going to put the contact information below. You guys got to help out and help solve this case. We want justice for Amber. There's a Facebook page that Debbie set up. There's more than 21,000 members on there. Guys, go join up. Show your support to Debbie.
Another thing I want to add real quick is Debbie has been like a mother to Amber. I had some heart-to-heart conversations with her, and she said Amber was a really good girl. She was a really good girl, and she went through a lot, and she really was close to Amber. And, that's all the more that we really need to find justice, because Debbie needs justice, Amber needs justice, and the whole family, everybody. We want to see justice for her. It needs to happen.
Yep, we sure do. And thank you so much, Debbie Hall. Thank you for your time and for sharing so much information with us. And thank you for being the voice for Amber. So many of these cases get pushed aside. You're looking to old cases. It's like the police have just forgotten about them. The community's forgotten about them. There's nothing out there anymore. The case is never going to be solved. Debbie's not going to allow that to happen in this case. She's on the ball, and we appreciate Debbie, and we appreciate her being the voice for Amber, and we appreciate her talking to us for this case. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.